Good morning, everybody. Hey, I wanted to make a video really quick and just give you some updates and reminders about our course and our specific situation. I know you all have received all the emails from the college and hopefully read them very carefully, but some of you have asked some very important questions about how we're going to continue on in Visual Basic Programming. If you watch this video and you have a ton of questions at the end, please feel free to shoot me an email or schedule an appointment on Calendly. I do plan on holding virtual office hours starting on Monday, which we'll talk about here in a few slides. So, current state of affairs. Just so everybody is clear, it sounds like the North Carolina Community College System has established guidelines that suggest that all courses that can be moved online should be moved online. For us, that isn't a huge deal. Most IT courses were already taught online in some way. This course has not been taught online in many years, so I am going through and making some changes to our Blackboard shell to make sure that we're ready to do that. Overall, this is going to be okay for us. We can make this work. I do feel really bad for some of the other programs on campus like welding, electrical, HVAC, all the construction trades, nursing, cosmetology. All of them can't necessarily move their things online, which may delay people's graduations and all kinds of other stuff. So in that regard, I think we're all very lucky to be able to work and learn in a discipline that works pretty well online. Due dates. So the college has instructed all of us to move our due dates by a week, to shift them by a week. And that was essentially because the college extended spring break. I did update the spreadsheet posted in course content to contain all of the due dates for the rest of the semester. It didn't harm us a great deal. We are in good shape. I don't think anyone's going to have to rush through anything. So I used our remaining time and tried to balance everything out. So we are running at about one chapter a week for the rest of the semester, which I think will be just fine. I'm still exploring some options for the final project. If we were going to be in class, my plan was for us to do some augmented reality, virtual reality with Visual Studio. There's a whole lot of problems with that now when you think about the context of the coronavirus. For example, I only have 10 headsets, which means we would all have to be trading headsets back and forth. And I really did not want to risk any type of coronavirus exposure from us sharing headsets. So I'm working on a different idea for our final project, and I hope that I have that posted for you later in the week or early next week. And I'm sorry, because I was really excited about us doing the AR/VR work, but I just don't think that's wise with everything that's going on right now. And your next round of due dates, in case you haven't read any of my emails or looked at the due date sheet, is March 29th, 3/29. Which is the Chapter 6 assignments related to loops that we started discussing before we went on our original spring break. So that gives you all a good bit of time. So I'm making this video on March the 19th, which means you've got about 10 days to finish everything up within Chapter 6 before we move on to Chapter 7. TestFest. I know a few of you have emailed me about TestFest, and more than likely it's going to be canceled. I have not received a formal cancellation yet. However, I am under the impression that any gathering of more than 10 people has been canceled. And I think you all probably realize that that's, it's a local decision, but it's also a state decision. And the community college system office is steering the ship here a little bit with what we can and can't do. And as much as I would love to do TestFest, it's sort of like the augmented reality, virtual reality headsets. I don't want to put any of us at risk to do that. So we can look at some other options. If the rule stays 10 people, we could take the software development fundamentals test in groups of 10, and we could sort of alternate half our class one day and half our class the next day. And I would be more than happy to do that with you all, and we could set up a couple of meetings towards the end of the semester where you could come in and take that test, and maybe another test or two if you're wanting to do networking or security fundamentals. For me to start planning that, though, I need to get a list of those of you who are interested in doing that. So if you could shoot me an email really quick and just say, hey, I would like to test, and I will see what I can work out for us with regard to that. So virtual office hours. I am holding virtual office hours starting next week on Monday, and I'm going to be doing that using Microsoft Teams. Teams is sort of the evolution of Microsoft's older Skype product. And you all have access to Teams through your student email. If you click the hamburger type menu in the upper left hand corner of your student email, you can see the link for Teams if you want to go into it that way. But I thought the easiest thing for me to do was to send out like a class-wide calendar invite that had a link to join my office hours in it. So if you check your email for a calendar invite, you should see that very soon. And that will allow you, just whatever device you're on, just click the link in the calendar invite and you can pop into my Teams meeting, ask me questions. If you are struggling to do any of the programming assignments, if you want to know anything about the chapter or whatever it is, that's really your awesome time to do that. And we can schedule some individual times as well if you can't make my virtual office hours. I think that the web app seems to work best on Chrome, but some folks have used it on Firefox without any issues. So you try whatever you're accustomed to, and we'll adjust if we need to. Okay, so Chapter 6 projects. They are posted and ready to go in course content. Project 1 is the guided application development piece that we did in Chapters 4 and 5. I don't feel the need to talk about it a great deal because the step-by-step instructions are in the book or in the PDF that I attached to the assignment in Blackboard. You should be able to pretty much knock it out just with those instructions. And the full complete code is posted at the end of those instructions as well, so you can compare and make sure that yours is working correctly. I also posted the image files that you're going to need to complete that project. All of that is attached to the assignment in Blackboard. So if you go to that project folder, you can see everything you need for Project 1. Project 2 is one of the case programming assignments from the end of the book, so there's not quite as much detail in the book in terms of how to complete Project 2. I posted the requirements with a screenshot of the GUI in the project folder of Chapter 6. But as always, keep a couple of things in mind as you start working through this. First and foremost, your solution does not necessarily have to meet mine. It doesn't have to match mine in any way. It does need to make sure that the requirements document is satisfied, though. So you need to be able to do the function that is outlined in that requirements document, but your code may look just a little bit different. I wanted to take a second, though, and show you my solution, just in case you want to see how I did it. And this is probably a little more complicated than it has to be, but it is what it is. So I started out by declaring 4 different numeric variables at the top. I have str speed, so a string for speed. I have DEC speed, so a decimal for speed. I have a decimal speed average and a decimal average at the top. And one thing that I wanted to point out, and I did a little bit differently here, is I put some input box message heading, a couple of error messages in here at the top with the text of those strings pre-declared. So later on when I use my input box, so if you check this out right here, this dim str input box message, it says enter the number of megabytes per second in your home internet speed. Anytime I want to use that in the input box, I can come right down here and reference that variable instead of typing it out. So if you have very similar strings that you're going to be using in an input box, or for that matter a message box, you can pre-declare them and just use the name of the variable to set that up instead of typing it all out directly in there. And I know we didn't get around to talking about that before we left, but that might save you a little bit of time and headache if you want to do that. I've also got a couple of loop variables here. I've got maximum number of entries as 10. The requirements document is asking us to get 10 different user speeds. And then I've essentially got a counter there starting at 1. So first off, I'm setting str speed as equal to an input box with the message, enter the number of megabits per second in your home internet, and asking them to essentially put in what their internet speed is. There's some notes here that I listed. I'm using a do until, and that's do until int number of entries is greater than the int max number of entries. So if I'm starting at 1, I'm counting my way up to 10, because int number of entries is starting at 1, maximum is 10. That's sort of my way of handling my counting here. Or str speed is null, or there's nothing entered into it either way. Validates that speed is a number, essentially. So I'm using an if inside of my loop, and that is essentially trying to check for input. So I'm saying if str speed is numeric, then convert str speed into a decimal, convert it to DEC speed. And I also need to validate that the number is a positive number, and I can do that by saying if DEC speed is greater than 0. And if it is greater than 0, I know it's a number at that point, and I know that it's a positive number, so I can go ahead and add it to my list box. So just like we played around with list boxes last week, it'd be lstspeed.items.add, and I'm adding the variable DEC speed that I just converted up there. And I'm going to calculate the average there too, so it's essentially, again, read the requirements document, but you're asking the user for 10 different speeds, and you're averaging it out. So there's some of that going on here as well. I'm changing my input box message here, normal box message. So if I come back up here and look and see, normal box messages, enter the number megabits per second of your connection speed. And that's also the kind of nice thing about declaring those messages early, because you can swap them out for different situations as need be. And you can see if there is an error, I can set my input box message equal to the alternative message there as well. Alright, so I'm exiting my loop here. I'm finishing up my if statements, my end if, end my loop. Got some error checking and all the logic pieces there to make this work. Again, yours can look different than this. That's totally okay. I think it's at this point with Chapter 6 and everything that's going on, I want you to be able to assemble something that works. Alright, so then I'm going to make my label visible here, and I'm going to calculate and display the average speed as needed. So DEC speed average equal DEC average divided by the number of entries minus 1, or int number of entries minus 1. And my label text here for average is average internet speed concatenated with the variable DEC speed. And I am using the toString method there to convert that to a string. And I'm adding the MBPS here on the end, so that looks nice and pretty when it's displayed. And yeah, then that's it. I'm disabling the BTN speed here. So after the calculation is done, you'd have to restart it. And just to show you what it looks like when it runs, I've set my forms background image here to the image I provided you. There's my button, and here's my list box. I'm going to make my list box just a little bit bigger here so it doesn't look quite as wonky. Let me start this up and show it to you. Takes just a second. Alright, so I am able to click this button and enter some speeds. Let's see. Alright, I entered 10 different numbers. I entered 10 for a lot of them, a couple 30, 40, and 50 here, so it averaged out to be 20.0 megabits per second. And that's essentially it for this little application. Hopefully you guys can get that set up without any issue. But if you watch this and you do have a bunch of questions about it, you want to join my office hours on Teams. So hope to see you all soon.